Hi everyone, good afternoon, and thanks for joining. My name is Rachel and I'm the owner of Helen and Olivia Flowers, and I will be teaching today's Christmas centerpiece workshop. Today we're going to be building a beautiful holiday centerpiece in a birch long and low container, and our color palette is beautiful and vibrant, lots of berry tones for the holiday. So for class, if you are designing along with us, you should have received a bucket of flowers to your doorstep, as well as a container with dry floral foam and some Christmas greenery. We've got a mix of fir and cedar and magnolia, and then you also should have received some pine cones and some water tubes that look a little bit like this. So in order to get yourself ready to design for class, there's a couple of little housekeeping things that you'll want to do. The first is to condition your floral foam. I have pre-soaked my foam. I'll show you what it looks like. In order to soak your foam, we recommend filling either a sink or a big tub of water, and then just throwing your foam in and allowing it to, on its own, just sink to the bottom. Foam is one of those things that you never want to touch or handle before it's fully saturated with water. So if you try to push it underneath the water, you'll wind up with big air pockets in your foam. So just leave it alone for 5 or 10 minutes and then come back after it's really well hydrated. You can cut your foam to size using any type of knife and just slip it right into your container. So you'll see I've got my entire container filled with foam. And then I'm going to add water so that the water level is pretty much at the top of the vase to make sure that my flowers are drinking really well. And I'm going to continue to add water every single day for the entire life of my arrangement. So that's what you'll need to do to get ready to design. You're also going to want to grab a pair of clippers or a cutting utensil for your arrangement. I am particular about my clippers, so I'm going to reach for I have a pink pair of ARS is the brand that I like to use. It's a Japanese clipper. And I believe this is linked in our Amazon storefront if you're looking for a good pair of clippers. And then you'll notice as I design, I also use a floral knife. But anything you've got at home is just great. And we're going to get started by tracing the shape of our arrangement with greenery. This is the first step for all of our Christmas arrangements, and it allows us to figure out what our actual footprint is going to look like when the flowers get added. So for our green up, I'm going to start with Magnolia. And everyone should have a really nice healthy bunch. You probably won't even need the entire bunch, so you can save whatever is left over to use for styling. It would be really pretty on a banquette, or one of my favorite holiday hacks is to use the individual leaves as place cards. You can write with a gold Sharpie your guests' names on it. So there's lots to be done with leftover Magnolia. To get started, I'm going to cut open the rubber band on my Magnolia, and I'm going to just rip off some of the low-lying leaves on my stems. I really want to end up with just this, so a few leaves at the tippy top, and I'm going to cut my stems to about the height of the vase. So we're working in a 4-inch tall vase, which means that our stem length, so the length beneath the leaves, should be about 4 inches, so that they drink really well and sit towards the bottom of the container. So I'm going to take my first Magnolia stem, and I'm just going to extend the end of my long and low, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So cutting at a nice angle with my Magnolia stems and then just popping them in to really blow out the ends of my long and low. A long and low is a great container to use on a rectangular dining table. So that's why it is such a popular style for the holiday. We sell a ton of these this time of year. So I'm going to pop a few pieces towards the center of my design now, and this is kind of taking on a fan shape. So my highest point is going to be in the center, and then I'm elongating the ends. And I'm not putting a ton of Magnolia on the base line on the long part of the container. I'm gonna reserve that for some of the softer greens like cedar and fir that are a little bit easier to work with. Okay, and I'll just pop in one more piece. I'm gonna step back because it's a lot easier to see this design up against a white wall than it is up against me. So I'm going to step back from time to time so that you can see what my design is looking like as we go. So here we go. And I'll give it a little spin. Okay. So I've got the basic shape traced out. Now I'm going to work with some of my evergreens. So I've got really pretty cedar. Cedar has an awesome drape to it. It gives some movement to your design. And so I'm gonna cut this into some smaller, more workable pieces. So when I cut my cedar, I'm just looking for lateral pieces that I can cut off and separate like that. And just kind of cutting above the new growth. Keeping in mind that I wanna have stem lengths that are around 4 inches to play with. And then I'm gonna work my cedar in along the baseline to get really beautiful drape. And I'm gonna do that all over my design. I always tell students, you wanna work with the drape, not against the drape. So see how this cedar has a lean or a curve like this? I wanna insert him so that I get that beautiful drape. I don't wanna insert upside down so it does a weird Charlie Brown Christmas tree effect. So I'm gonna take a minute or two. I know you've got a really healthy amount of cedar, which is great. We'll all take a minute or two just to pop our cedar in with a focus along the baseline, but also mixing cedar in all over. So it's fine to have some that's sitting a little bit higher up in your arrangement as well. So we'll just layer it in. Again, really working with the natural curve of the stem. So when you get a nice little drapey piece, make sure to work with that. And I'm gonna plan to put just half of my cedar in for now, knowing that I'm gonna come behind at the end and add a little bit more. So we're not gonna go too crazy. So I think I'm happy with the amount of coverage that I have with cedar. I'm going to transition onto my Douglas fir next. And after we're done with the Douglas fir, you can pat yourself on the back. We have accomplished what we've needed to accomplish with our greenery. We'll be ready to move on to flowers. But you can see how laying a base of greenery gives you a really nice roadmap for where to put the flowers. And it makes it a lot less intimidating to add your flowers. So let's go ahead and pop some fir in. Fir comes in a giant piece. So we're just going to cut it apart into more manageable, workable pieces. And I'm going to continue cutting it apart. So just chopping into small little sections. Fir is my favorite evergreen to work with because it has really nice thin stems that are easy to clean with your own hands. A lot of the heavier firs like silver and noble have thick stems, lots of sap, and you really can't just take your hand and peel back the needles. So fir is always a favorite of mine. You still get that pretty fir look that you're going for, but just a lot easier to handle, a lot less sticky to handle. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my stems, and you can see I just peeled back all the pine needles for the bottom part that's going into the foam. And I'm just gonna work my fir in the exact same way that I have worked in my cedar. So I have some pieces that are draping, I have some pieces that are going in more towards the top of the design, just kind of blending and working it throughout. As far as the amount of time that it takes to make an arrangement, I would say it takes me almost as much time to green up a container as it does to actually put the flowers in. So it's an incredibly time-consuming process, but it is really key to getting a lush, beautiful look for your design. So stick with it. Okay, so I think I'm gonna pop 2 more little pieces in, and then we're calling it. All right, so that is my finished green up. I'm really happy with the shape. I've got a gorgeous fan shape, and I've got some pretty drapey pieces, like this cedar that's kind of falling down. I really like that. So I am now ready to start with my flowers. General rule of thumb, anytime we arrange with flowers, we're always usually starting with our largest blooms first and then working our way back to the smallest, which is how we're going to approach this arrangement. The first ingredient that we are going to reach for is our white kale. And I have been an absolute baby this season about getting this exact variety of white kale. I think it is so gorgeous. It's a ruffle variety. And a lot of the white kale this year, for some reason, has been coming in with a pink center to it, and I have not loved that, a pinky purple center. This is true white and green, which I love, very crisp. So the kale is a little bit intimidating when you first get your hands on it. There's a lot of leaves at the bottom that we're gonna need to peel back. So I'm going to just rip off the low-lying leaves and just keep like the top 50% or so of the kale attached to the stem. And then once I've ripped off the low-lying leaves, I'm going to carefully massage open with my hands the kale so it turns into this gorgeous rose-looking shape. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that with all of my kale really quickly. Kale is not something that bruises, so you don't need to be worried about handling the face of your kale. There's another one, really pretty. And finally, our last piece of kale cleaned up. So once we've reflexed out the petals, we're going to cut our stems to length, and we're going to shoot for that magical 4 to 5 inch stem length so that we can insert and get the bottom of the stem towards the bottom of the vase where the water lives. And I'm going to place 4 of my kale on the corners and 1 in the center as my high point in my design. So I'll show you how I'm placing. I'm picking the face of my flower to make sure that my stem is angled so that faces out. Keep in mind that you do not want to put all of your stems straight up and down. So think about this kind of like a bowl shape. So you want to have some that are faced out at a 45-degree angle. So I'm definitely going to insert my kale more at an angle so you get the really pretty face of the flower. So that's the first corner placed, the second corner I'll put in as well, and then I'll do the back corners. We have a lot of thick stems going into this container between the magnolia and the kale. So if you get resistance when you're trying to place your stem, just try shifting it an inch or so in the other direction and it should slide right in place. All right, so a quick spin move and you can see I've got the 4 corners occupied. And now I'm gonna take my last piece of kale. I'm gonna leave this stem a tiny bit longer, maybe 6 inches or so that he can really stand up straight and sit in the height of the magnolia leaves. So very slightly, our last kale is sitting above the other kale. We still want to keep it pretty low because this is a centerpiece, so maximum height for centerpiece I would say would be 10 to 12 inches, keeping in mind that you know, folks usually are sitting pretty close to one another at a dining room table and you don't want to be peering over your flowers. So now that we've got those placed, We're gonna start working with our spray roses next. And we're using a beautiful variety called Gemstar. They're really pretty, really high petal count, so they almost have the look of a garden rose, but in miniature form. And the color is a really rich raspberry. Years ago, I used to think Christmas was only red, white, and green, nothing else, and it was very literal about my interpretation of the holiday. And then I decided to throw the rule book out the window. And we've been using a lot of raspberry tones and berry tones ever since, and I think they are so beautiful and really brighten a Christmas color palette. So I hope you love raspberry and red together as much as I do. With our Gemstar spray roses, we're going to just start working these guys in along the vase line. And when I say vase line, what I mean is where the vase meets your floral foam. So these are great to kind of fill in some of the holes along the vase line. I've cut my stems to about that 4-inch length so I can slide them in and they'll really sit low down in the arrangement. And we're just going to put one on one side, one on the other, and then we're going to take our third and kind of pop him in somewhere in the center. So you can see that they really are doing their job of filling that no man's land at the vase line. With my last spray rose, I'm going to see if I can separate this stem into 2 pieces. Some of you may be lucky like I am and get some long laterals on your spray rose stems. If you are lucky, go ahead and divide them. And we're going to place these wherever we've got a nice open space. Okay. So that's where mine are sitting. And now we've got a really well traced out arrangement. The rest of this is going to be easy because we've got our corners covered, we've got our highest point marked out, and we filled in some of the dead space. So the rest of our flowers, it's going to make a lot of logical sense where they go. So let's move on to our roses. We have 2 colors that we're playing with. We've got the traditional Christmas red, and then we also have a beautiful berry toned rose. The berry toned rose is called Hotspot. It's a favorite of ours, big head, really lasting rose. And then for our red roses, we're using Freedom, which is a very typical red rose. So let's start with our red roses first. I'm gonna take all of the leaves off the stem. The reason we do this is twofold. So we want to take anything non-essential off the stem because it's one less thing for the flower to keep alive. And the second reason is we never want to get leaves into our foam or into water in a vase because it can cause bacteria. So we're just going to yank all these leaves off. There are a few thorns, so just be careful as you handle them. And we're going to do this for the red roses and the pink roses. It's always when we get to rose conditioning that it occurs to me why wedding flowers cost as much as they do, because there's just a lot of handling that needs to happen to clean the flowers. So it's definitely work conditioning roses. All right, so once leaves are off, we're going to then pay attention to the actual flower. I'm gonna come around the table because I wanna show you up close what I'm talking about. So all of your roses, when they come from the farm, look haggard. They look super sad, and that's just from transport and growing in a wholesale environment. So the leaves that you see right here are called guard petals. So it's a type of leaf, looks like a petal but actually a leaf, and it's what protected the flower when it was out in the fields growing, and it's also what shows the most damage from transport. So anytime we handle roses, we need to peel away the guard petals, and each rose is a little bit different, how many guard petals need to come off, but underneath the yucky guard petals is a beautiful, happy, healthy rose. So we're going to go through all of our roses, and we're just gonna peel away these outer guard petals. A little bit of a chore, but worth it. And as we do this, we only want to be handling the rose from the outside. Never want to touch the face of the rose because that's the part that bruises. So you want to handle these as gently as you can and only from the side. I find that it's a lot faster if you condition all of your roses, stick them in a pile, and then add them to the arrangement versus doing them one by one. So that's why I do it this way. Okay, getting there. Occasionally, if I get a rose that's really tight, I'll blow on the face of the rose, which will release the petals and open it a little. So if you have a rose that's looking a little sad, you can do that too. All right, the last one. So now that I've got all of my roses conditioned and looking beautiful, I'm ready to start adding them into my arrangement. For stem length, now that we're onto roses, I would recommend giving a little bit longer length so that the roses can sit a little higher up in your arrangement. So I'm cutting my stem to about 6 or so inches, and I'm just gonna start popping them in. My pink roses, I'm not going to worry so much about grouping or pairing them because I only have 3. So I'm just gonna work those in wherever I've got space. And then my red roses, I may try to cluster them a little bit. We'll see how this goes. So I'm just being cautious to spread my pink roses out evenly. That way you get that shot of hot pink from all sides. So I've got my 3 hot pink roses placed, and then I'm gonna work in my red roses next. So still keeping a 6-inch or so stem length, and I'm just gonna start working these guys in. So I'm gonna do a little grouping, pocket these in next to each other. And when I group, I like to do trios when possible. And a trio can be a triangle or a pyramid. I don't like my roses to be so tight that they're squishing each other. So if you feel like the sound effect of your roses is ee, that's too tight. So you want to give them a little bit of room to breathe. So once we've got one trio in, we're going to move to the other side of the arrangement and do another little pocket of red roses. Just like that. It's really filling in now, so I love the way this is taking shape. And then you want to make sure you're also giving the ends of your design some attention. So even though we've got the Magnolia really extending the length of our long and low, you'll notice that I tucked a little red rose in on the end. I want to make sure that I'm also putting some color on each end of the arrangement. Okay, so I feel really happy about the coverage here. I think it's looking great. So the next thing we're going to add in is going to be our Hypericum. We have a beautiful, rich burgundy color of Hypericum, which I think gives some needed depth to this arrangement. So we're going to peel away the leaves and leave just the berries. And we're going to cut this down to length. I would say 4 or 5 inches is good. And we're just gonna start working the Hypericum in. And look at what a pretty accent that is. I know it's tough to see because it's such a dark burgundy color, but it is so fun to get berries tucked into a fresh floral arrangement, and I think really Christmassy. So we're just gonna work these guys in wherever you've got space. Really pretty. All right, so next up, we have gorgeous white Lisianthus. This is coming in from Holland, And I think it's a really pretty complement to the kale. So with our Dutch Lysianthus, we're going to cut this down into more workable pieces. If you have long enough laterals that you can separate and make 2 stems, you can certainly do that. You also can decide if you like the look of your Lysianthus buds or if you don't. It's usually a split jury, a hung jury on whether or not folks love the buds or don't love the buds. I like some, so I may break off, I don't know, half of them. The buds will not open on the Lysianthus, so it's purely a textural element if you decide to keep them or not. All right, so with our Lysianthus, we're gonna cut this. I would say leave the stem on the longer side just so it can sit towards the top part of your design. So I'm gonna leave my stems to 6 or 7 inches, and I think Lysianthus is really pretty sitting a bit higher up. So you can see this is my first Lysianthus stem. Gives some pretty movement, almost like a dancing flower at the top of the arrangement. This is an example of a stem that I'm gonna split. I have nice long laterals, so I'm just going to chop chop and turn one stem into 2. Keep tucking this in. These are definitely delicate little stems, so I would not try to force your Lysianthus. If it feels like it's not going, pick a new spot. That just happened for me. I had to try 2 or 3 times to get my stem in. Lysianthus is a great flower to have up your sleeve towards the end of an arrangement because it's awesome to fill whatever little crevices or holes you have in your design. This is definitely a flower that you would add towards the end of your arranging process and not towards the beginning. Next up, we're gonna pop in some gorgeous white thistle. White thistle is a favorite this time of year. It also comes in blue, and it also comes in a ton of fun painted, like spray painted gold and silver and white colors. But the white thistle is a really pretty complement to the color palette that we're working with. It's also great texture, and this time of year, everyone is all about texture. So we aren't a big texture shop until we get into fall and holiday season, and then we can't get enough of it. So I'm gonna take my thistle and my clippers, and I'm just gonna cut these laterals because they're super long to work with, and just separate into smaller pieces. And I'm just gonna pop it in all around my design. If you like a more organic feel, you can certainly let your thistle hang out a little bit farther, so it's up to you. It is designer's choice at this point, so you decide how much you want to show off your thistle. It's also often awesome if you look along the baseline and see that you've got a little bit of foam still showing. The thistle is a great little tool to work in low in your arrangement to fill in any spots. All right, my arrangement is totally filled in at this point, which is great. So everything we're adding from this point on, at least for me, is kind of like an added bonus. So in my bucket, what I have left, some gorgeous Lendin Cones. These are, again, really fun texture, very long lasting. So I'm just gonna clean up the stem the same way that I did my evergreen by peeling away these leaves. And I'm just gonna cut the stem length to about 6 inches and pop them in all over my design. I think one of the coolest things about a holiday centerpiece is obviously from afar it looks like beautiful flowers, but when you get up close to this long and low, you're really going to appreciate all of the little detail elements that make it so interesting. So next up after this, I'm going to reach for my dried pine cones. This is a must this time of year. It is not a holiday centerpiece if you do not have pine cones. So I'm gonna pop these guys in all over my arrangements. We import these from the West Coast and they come pre-picked and they're fantastic. They're pretty inexpensive. They look so cute for the season. They're a tiny little size and just easy to slip in because they have a stem attached. So I really love and appreciate working with pine cones. Look how pretty that is right there. All right, so next we're going to grab a little bit of seeded eucalyptus and just sprinkle it in for extra texture and movement. Eucalyptus is a lot like cedar, which I showed you before, the really bright green greenery. It's got gorgeous drape to it. So this is an ingredient that I love to work into my arrangement just along the baseline to get some cascade and drape. So I'm gonna cut out my eucalyptus into smaller pieces, just like this, and work it in around my baseline. And also, I'm gonna pop a few pieces in towards the center of my arrangement for some fun texture. It does have the famous eucalyptus scent to it, which is really pretty this time of year. Do not feel like you need to use all of your eucalyptus, just use how much you like. When you feel like it's time to stop, you stop adding. Eucalyptus would also be pretty if you wanted to extend the ends of your design more. So if you're wanting to create a really long runner for your table, this would be a prime ingredient to extend the length of your arrangements. Okay, so the last thing that we're gonna add to our design is the most delicate, and that's why we're saving it for the bitter end. Everyone has in their bucket a stem of red amaryllis, and I'll show you what the stem looks like. So you may have varied stages of openness. Your amaryllis is gonna come with either 3 or 4 blooms attached, and they will open at different times. So the first bloom will open, the second bloom will start to crack open, and then the buds will remain closed until you remove the open amaryllis from the stem. So this may be a little bit of a project, and it may be something that you need to do in steps. So you may, out the gates, get 1 bloom that's open, and then you can add to your arrangement as the other blooms open. I'm gonna show you how we do this up close. So you're gonna pluck off your open flower, and you wanna leave as much of a nub or stem on that you can. So that's my flower. And you're gonna fill a water tube fully with water all the way to the tippy top, and you're gonna put your cap on it right here. And then you're gonna take a knife or scissors, and you're gonna slit open the top of your water tube 2 or 3 times. So I'm just opening it. I'll show you what this looks like. So you can see I've made a couple of extra slits in the top of my water tube cap, and then I'm going to be able to just insert my bloom straight into the water tube, just like that. So it has a water source to drink. Now once it's in the water tube, you can just slide it into your arrangement, and it is so gorgeous sitting in your arrangement. You should hopefully get 2 blooms. If you get more, then you are a rock star and you've managed to open your amaryllis stem really well. But however many you get, it's just an added bonus for your design. So I'm going to slide a second one in right over here, and I'll show you what that looks like. So the amaryllis, I think, are so beautiful, so classic and Christmassy. So this is what your finished arrangement should look like. It is a stunner. To keep it happy and healthy over the course of the holiday, I would recommend adding water to this once a day, all the way to the point that it overflows. The reason is all of your flowers are big drinkers. Your Christmas greens in particular drink a ton of water. So we want to make sure that your Christmas drains are not pulling all of the water out of the foam and depleting the water reserves. So once a day, add your water and keep these away from a direct sunlight source like a window, and away from heaters or heat vents. And they should be really happy and healthy for the holiday. And that is it. And if you have any questions, I hope you'll message us or comment on the video and we can get back to you. But wishing all of you a very, very happy holiday, happy new year. And we have just released all of our spring workshops, both in studio and virtual. So we hope to see you in one of them soon. Happy holidays, everybody. Bye-bye.